What is today? The Thursday, March 7th meeting of the Ann Arbor Greenbelt Advisory Commission is called to order. Can we start with a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Fife? Commissioner Buttrick?
Here.
Commissioner Ramsberg?
Here.
Commissioner Kears?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
Commissioner Brand? Here. Commissioner Stoffer?
Here.
Commissioner Perman? Commissioner Schuler? Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving next to the approval of the agenda, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Any comments, suggestions? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. Moving to the minutes, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Okay, let's take a minute now and see if we have any.
I do have one note to add. There are two sets, although the agenda only mentions May 3rd from 2018. I went through all of the minutes last year to make sure they all had been submitted to council and noticed that those had not, so I wanted to bring them to you today.
Oh, fantastic.
So you have May as well as February.
Okay, because I saw a series name and I was like, I didn't even look at the front date. So we have
So there's two sets.
the May 3rd of last year minutes and then the Thursday, February 7th minutes.
Yeah.
So we should read and review both of these.
Yes.
Let's take 10 minutes now to do that. Just kidding. Anyone spot any errors, omissions?
Yeah, I have a suggestion. On page 3 at the top, Barry Lonick, L-O-N-I-K.
Oh, nice. So this would be the May meeting.
May.
Oh, I'm
minutes?
sorry. I'm
May or
talking about the
February.
February meeting.
Oh, the February meeting.
Did you ask about May?
I didn't distinguish between them.
L-O-N-I-K?
Yeah, it's I-K.
Oh, great. Thanks. Any other corrections, suggestions? They look good to go? We're going to be voting on both of these. All in?
In the,
Yes.
the list of, on the top of page 3, the February one, we had mentioned Tillian Farmers is another possible one that's not in that. I don't know if we want to capture it there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh, no. I can't remember what we...
Yeah, we had talked about talking about that off record. But anyways, doesn't matter. So I think it should maybe just stay as is for the moment.
Strong feelings one way or the other? I can't find it myself, but I didn't bring my readers, so I can't actually see what I'm looking at.
You're showing your age, John.
Don't get me started. Any other changes, suggestions? Okay, all in favor of the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Minutes pass. Public commentary, seeing that we have no public at this time, we move to old business. I don't think we have any old business. New business, we have staff updates. Remy.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Number one, this time I actually have a number for the budget update. As of end of quarter one 2018, which is the most recent audited balance for the Greenbelt Fund, we have $5,550,278. If anyone wants to know, or I can just say, as of right now, the total pipeline of projects includes, well, let's be careful here, 1, 2, 3. $22 projects. That includes ones that we are spearheading or we're pursuing in partnership with other conservation programs. That's a total of 2,100 plus acres in the pipeline. And given that they're at varying stages, not all of them have appraisals, but between appraised values and estimated values, given the regional costs, that would put it over $6 million in value for the whole pipeline. But we take 2 to 3 years at times to close projects, so having more in the pipeline than we have in the current fund balance is not necessarily an issue.
I guess I don't understand. How is that not necessarily an issue?
Millage funds will continue,
Oh, of course.
yeah, and we'll close and work down the pipeline, but it'll take time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Quick recap. The Ann Arbor District Library hosted a panel discussion on open space preservation and more or less land linking or land access options for new and beginning farmers. So on the panel was myself, Ginny Trocchio on behalf of Washtenaw County, Larry Dahl, who is a board a board member at Legacy Land Conservancy and a farmer himself and the owner of a a protected property in Sharon Township, I believe. Another young farmer who was at Tillian, Hannah. The last name's escaping me, but and then Kathy Sample from Argus Farm Stop. So the 5 of us spoke on behalf of each of our own initiatives, how it relates to the local food system, open space preservation, and intergenerational transfer of farmland. And it was a really great turnout, about 40 people or more, and it's recorded, so it's online if anyone's dying to watch. And it was just another opportunity for us to get the word out about our impact.
Thank you for attending.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you get any unusual questions? Did anybody ask how they could apply for an easement? Or was it mostly a listening audience?
I think one of the most interesting points that was brought up in the discussion was the shortcoming of conservation easements being a tool to help intergenerational transfer or land access for new and beginning farmers. Because for several years in the beginning, easements weren't taking into consideration the needs for flexible building locations for farm operations, whether that be hoop houses or other temporary farm structures. I know language has become more and more friendly to that kind of use on a property as long as it's related to the farm operations and doesn't threaten the conservation values of a property, to be determined by the easement holder, the city, or any of the partner organizations. And that's not consistent across all easements by any means. It can be more restrictive. But one of the young farmers in the audience was making the point that, yes, it does drop the price and it makes it that much more affordable. But in terms of actually executing the business plan that I had intended, I'm either confined to a smaller area because the rest of the property's been taken off the table for something along the lines of hoop houses and extended season growing. So there were points there brought up which are valid and need to be considered.
But those are temporary structures, so they might not actually clash with the land set aside. But that would be
Yes.
something to know more about for
Yes.
our purposes.
Yeah, I would defer to an attorney and, you know, what constitutes as a temporary structure.
Sure.
And 10 years ago, the language in an easement might be reading more restrictive, and nowadays it's reading less restrictive.
Sure.
So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis for the projects that are completed. But moving forward, it's an opportunity to have a discussion with the attorneys drafting the easements to make
Yeah.
sure that that's being kept in mind.
Sure.
Because we do want to be a part of the solution in that land access problem that we're seeing.
Great.
Okay, this is a quick but in my mind heartening thing. At the presentation at the Ann Arbor District Library, the county did share a map that they had put together of protected land circa 2000 versus protected land now. And so on the screen, maybe
on
you
our
have it in front of you.
monitors, right?
Yeah, it's on our
Oh,
monitors.
great, cool.
Height.
So this is really cool. You all know the timeline probably better than I do of when the local initiatives really gained steam and were passed and the work started getting done. But for our own program, the millage passed in 2003 and we started closing on our first projects in the 2006 range. So with that, the impact to date, you go from a relatively parks-heavy landscape, obviously clustered up in the Waterloo-Pinckney area, to 2019 of that much being added to the map in 19 years, which I just think is extremely impressive and indicative of the high density of conservation programs that we have available in Washtenaw County, the ability for those programs to get along in partnership and leverage each other's funds. And certainly the Greenbelt has played a huge role in changing that landscape. So again, 2000 to 2019.
Yeah, it looks great. It really is inspiring. And it's funny, when you track, as I've been tracking the last several weeks, watching the debate of the Lepkowski property play out on places like MLive, and finding the number of people who either feel that it's done a great deal or done nothing. And this helps us all toward a kind of more nuanced, critical understanding of great progress and still existing opportunities. So I think it answers those who would say it's done nothing, because this is clearly a great achievement. It just shows to the eyeball that if you drive outside of Ann Arbor, you're very quickly going to encounter permanently protected properties. Some of them will be accessible as parks or areas with public access. Others will be working farms or natural areas that remain in private ownership. But you are going to encounter these places. But it also shows that there's, and it even sort of, for me, addresses this odd criticism that kept coming up that it was somehow detrimental to growth and development outside of Ann Arbor. But clearly, it's not prohibiting growth. You can just see that there are places where there's lots of land. So,
A little factoid just keep it in your back pocket for when you need it in conversation. The entire acreage of the Greenbelt district minus the city limits is about 80,500 acres. And we've protected 5,345.28 acres. That's 6.1%. So it is a significant impact, but if there's 80,000 plus acres, we're certainly not protecting all of it. And I think we're halfway through. We have a chance to bring that number up significantly and work on fulfilling the 1,000-acre block strategic plan goals. But I have heard as well the idea that we're taking a lot of land off the table, but 6.1% so far. So that doesn't seem like a game changer.
A percentage that might be interesting to produce for reporting is on a creek shed basis, because then you're talking in terms of impervious surface, affecting impervious surface, and their small amounts make a big difference, so it might be a nice way to talk about those.
I do know I have the watershed breakdown, but that's obvious. There's 2 watersheds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there might be 3 actually. I know the Raisin and the Huron, obviously. I'm not sure if there's another, but
There is in Superior, but I can't remember. It's the River Rouge.
but yes, I can.
River Rouge is the other one in Superior Township.
Okay, it is in Superior. Yeah. Okay.
But creek shed basis would really get at that,
Would
that
really help.
threshold of the 10% impervious surface, and how some of these parcels, just individual parcels, could have kept that below 10%.
I am wondering if the Huron River Watershed Council does have that already.
They might.
Seems like something they
Sure.
have.
I mean, they do have it for each creek shed, but not which parcels through the Greenbelt have contributed to that lack of impervious
Yeah,
surface.
yeah. Certain, at the very least, we need to be sharing with them our most up-to-date layer for protected lands
Yeah.
so that they can make.
Shelley, would you
Sheila
mind,
counts.
Sheila, I'm sorry, would you mind speaking into the
Oh, sure,
microphone?
sorry. I'll bring it
Make
closer.
it easier for us at this end.
Sure, sure, sure.
Okay.
Did you hear what I said?
Well, not really.
I was suggesting that looking at this percent of land by creek shed would be very powerful, because it would allow you to see that small percentage change in protected area has a large effect on impervious surface impact. So it might be just another way of communicating impact, that 6.1% sounds small, but on a creek shed basis, it'll be a larger percentage of the total, which affects not going over that 10% impervious surface.
And that 10% scientifically is important?
That's a critical threshold for decreased water quality.
Great, thank
So
you.
it might be a nice way to
Yeah.
communicate it.
Yeah.
You'll be able to do that with the fancy GIS stuff
Yeah.
you do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it next month.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, this county map obviously should be shared widely,
And that's what I think if you did little bits.
and I'm sure we'll figure out ways to roll that out in different contexts.
Could I
Yeah.
ask one other question?
Yeah.
I noticed, obviously, we all know that the city of Ypsilanti in that area is not included in the Greenbelt. But I'm wondering if you could go back and give me a before and after. Have they been adding protected property too in their area? Not much.
The parcels are just smaller.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm
Because
seeing
remember,
any
parts of Superior
change.
Township is technically an IPSI address too.
But I will say this is getting into the very finite details of this map, but the county, who is the one that put this together, did inform me that the City of Ann Arbor parks layer, if you look between the 2 maps, does not change, because all they have is current data, and they don't have the data for when those parks closings happened. So if parkland within the city limits has been added, the change between these 2 maps does not reflect that.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's the same for the city of Ypsilanti.
There are some new parks that are added, yeah.
When I toggle it?
There are dark
Yeah.
green
Oh,
parcels
yeah.
added.
Yeah,
In the city.
Oh, I see a couple. I do, yeah. Okay. So the county had reached out to me and asked if I could get them a list of when all of the city parks closings were, so that they could change this to reflect in the toggle between the 2.
And some of them are gonna be, you know, like some of them are going to be really hard to see
Yeah.
because a lot of it is about increasing access, so, you know,
Mhm.
getting an access easement, you know, it's going to be really small, but in terms of increasing access to those parks
Yeah,
is significant.
yeah,
Or something like, you know, the Bryan Community Center, the house, buying the house next door as part of the Greenbelt, big impact on provision of services, but in terms of actual land, it's a, you know, it's a
right,
very tiny piece of land.
yeah.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. Next is a very rough summary of comments regarding the Lepkowski resolution that I wanted to make sure you all had, because not everyone was able to attend that council meeting. These are paraphrased. If you need exact quotes, please refer to the video of the council meeting. But I wanted to give you a chance to read these, and if you have questions for me or for each other, this was a space to discuss that.
I thought it was really helpful, Remy, that you put this together to sort of see how people are connecting it to other city initiatives, the climate action plan, the sustainability goals. And I wondered, are there, is that part of the Greenbelt explicitly, or it's just the Greenbelt supports those other actions or initiatives? Is there any legal connection there that people know
I
of?
believe we predate the
We predate
climate
it.
action plan
But the climate action plan didn't include.
and the sustainability framework.
Somehow explicitly include Greenbelt properties as contributing to climate action efforts?
I'm not sure.
So they're making the link more just mentally, right? Like,
Mhm.
which is a good thing. I'm just kind of curious how we could, if that's more official, then it legitimizes the Greenbelt even more, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks recognize that without a doubt, we have contributed to advancing those goals, but I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the sustainability framework anywhere.
Or strategic plan, or,
And I'm trying to remember back to because I was a parks commissioner back then when we had some
Okay.
initial meetings about the sustainability framework, and I don't really remember a lot of Greenbelt participation in that. It was a long time ago.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right, the Greenbelt, you know, it does precede both the sustainability framework, the climate action plan for sure. So, but I think the sustainability framework could easily be applied. And if there was a critique that I found to be most compelling in this language, it was when, you know, Chip Smith was asking about, you know, what is the value of this land to our local food economy? What, you know, can we make the connection? And I think those are fair.
Mhm.
Those are fair questions that we should be thinking about.
Mhm.
So, you know, there are other ways to communicate the value
Yeah.
beyond just the preservation itself.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say quickly, thank you to Councilmember Grand for doing a lot of work, I think, with other council members to help educate them about the Greenbelt and specifically about the Lepkowski property. Commissioners, there might have been others, but Commissioner Cares was on the alternate list to speak. Chairperson Bike spoke and spoke really well, and I thought. And then I ducked out during the break. I didn't actually watch, which I think, what was it, 11:30 at night whenever you all end. I just thank you for your work. So I watched the live teleplay, you know, a couple days later. I watched the recording a couple days later, and I was just struck. I just want to say what a tremendous turnaround to go from a 7-4 vote against to a 10-1 vote in favor, and it looks like there's still some areas for providing more information. It was news. I mean, I'm embarrassed that I didn't really understand that the 1/3 that gets bandied about, and Councilmember Grant tried valiantly to explain this, does not pertain to the number of leveraged partners going in to cover the other 2/3 of the cost, right? It refers to the appraised value versus the fair market value of the property. And in that regard, and this came out in a letter that was submitted by a group of conservation leaders, if I recall.
Yeah.
But made the point that over the course of its history, the Greenbelt has had a 35% essentially leverage rate in terms of the dollars going toward the conservation easements and the purchases versus what is the fair market value of the land. And it feels like that's one area to kind of work on with respect to members. Hopefully, I don't know that we capture all of them, but it just feels like a couple of them who support the Greenbelt just didn't understand the distinction. And then the other really does speak to this concern that they have that other townships, that other partners are participating. And we know that the internal track record has been great, and that some townships have more funds than others. How to do this in a way that's encouraging and inclusive, and as I thought Councilmember Ramlawi said really well, that it's not weaponized, that it's not used to beat up or make others, to beat up on others, I thought was really encouraging. But demonstrating, as we do, as happens time and again, that we really are leveraging all other possible funding sources.
Yeah, I cannot overemphasize in my own view the importance of a bunch of commissioners being, or city council members being on our tour in June.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Historically, that's not been the case, but maybe this is a good year to do that with all the new people they have.
Yeah. There's a chance we might have a fall bus tour instead of a June
Whenever
bus
it
tour.
is, so be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, can I just, I want to, Rami was instrumental in helping me talk through that new 1/3, as was the letter from all the former chairs of this commission. And then I just want to thank all of you that went out and advocated with individual council members and really sat down with them and talked them through this. There was a lot of effort, and I wish all of you could have been there to see the landowners and their reaction when it finally did go through.
Yeah.
Because it was beautiful.
Were they here that night?
They were there.
They were there the whole time.
And, there were tears, and it was fantastic. Just
Yeah.
a lot of relief and a lot of appreciation to all of you here for helping them keep their family's farm.
Did you want to say anything else about does anybody else have any final comments on Lepkowski?
I guess I have one other comment. As I read through the different comments, and of course I have my own personal attitude, I guess, towards all the different council members, but there's one of many that I liked. If you look down the first page, the second Jane Lum comment, healthy to reject, I don't agree with that, but have an occasional conversation about the program. I think that's one thing that we let fall by the wayside. I mean, the Greenbelt Commission, we would give our proposals to city council, and then they would vote them, and then we'd go on and do the next one. We never did really go back as a group and say to them, here's what we're doing, here's our goals. And, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps we were a little bit lax in just assuming that when the new council members came in, they would automatically support us and approve.
I think you had many years of history behind you to, with which to make that assumption, so I wouldn't beat yourself up over it. That's for sure.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
it's a brand new world. I think I did speak to it at the meeting. I think we had this sort of just unfortunate mix of staff turnover and council turnover at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, they're just, I think, and it just, and late meetings and good things rarely happen late at night. So, you know, you're wanting to get to sleep. You don't think you need to have this preemptive kind of conversation. So we're learning, and I'm just pleased the outcome was the way it was.
Amen.
All right.
The next Greenbelt resolution for council will be on the March 18th agenda,
Okay.
just FYI, so.
And maybe this serves as a good transition to the scoring discussion, because it did come up at the meeting. It's been something that we've talked about internally on GAC for a long time, and that is the fact that the scoring criteria are complicated, and that the way that we convey them might be simplified. So maybe we can move to that now. And you wrote up a staff memo, very helpful to guide us, but do you want to summarize the main points?
Sure. Certainly, the point I want to emphasize the most is that I'm not providing a methodology by any means, just prompting questions from experience that are important to consider when approaching developing a scoring system from scratch or revising one. And Sheila provided a lot of feedback as well on this memo. So if you have questions, you can ask them to me or Sheila. I think council's comments on the Lepkowski resolution and project, such as Chip Smith's, indicated that where does this fit into our sustainability framework and climate action plan? But I would also take it, even to a more basic and closer level to the Greenbelt itself and say, where does the scoring fit into our strategic plan? And is it really reflective of the priorities that we're setting forth in our strategic plan? Our strategic plan it needs to be updated. I believe 2013 was the last time we updated it, and it was supposed to maybe run for 4 or 5 years, something along that range. So it's time. I think we need to certainly have a strategic plan so that we have a horse driving the cart, and we'll get the horse developed. But while we're doing that, it's not unreasonable to fine-tune the cart as well and look at it critically and say, is this what we want in terms of scoring? So I don't think we need to finish the strategic plan first and then hard stop, then go on to scoring. I think they can happen in tangent. But certainly the emphasis and outcome from Lepkowski, and as coming on as new staff, I'm looking at it, and it was one of the things I noticed as well when I came on board, reading the strategic plan and looking at our scoring system, saying, I don't know how many connections I'm seeing here. And that could have been just me not understanding the conversations that led up to the 2016 adoption of that update to the scoring system. There have been 3 updates to the scoring system since the program began, 2006, 2010, and 2016. I don't know if 2006 was an update as much as it was establishing it, but there have been essentially 3 scoring systems. If you compare them side by side, they vary very little. It's tweaking weights for particular criteria, and it might be adding or removing 1 or 2 criteria. But a real overhaul is not something that the program has seen. So 1 is thinking about how to integrate the strategic plan. 2 is the data representation. Again, this was a really useful piece of feedback that we got from council, I think, during the Lepkowski discussion. Was it scores 54% of all possible points, and you're telling me this is in the upper half of all projects that have been scored? I mean, I hear that. I can see why 54% when you're coming from school sounds bad, but it's not. That was a really strong property. So obviously we have some work that we can do to fine-tune the system to better reflect the quality and the value of these properties. But at the same time, the value of the Lepkowski property was going to be a constant. It's how we're shaping the evaluation of it and the representation of that data that can be manipulated and better more readable and more digestible by the public when we present these, and to council when they're making decisions. So this gets into that we're hoping to secure an intern for the summer who would basically just spend time exploring different data visualizations and representations and how to best communicate the information that we choose as a priority to us. So whatever criteria we establish, whatever weights we give them, the intern would work to develop a template where if we choose this is the best data representation, we can plug that in and have it. So it doesn't need to be a visualization that knows what the scoring is. We can take longer than the length of the intern's summer to develop the scoring and tweak it and talk about it. But once it's established, we'll have a model to plug it into to show better the value of the properties we're considering. So that's point 2. 3 is don't reinvent the wheel, which I think we can all appreciate. There are far smarter people than I working at other organizations who have already put in many, many, many hours into similar analyses. So I think we need to leverage that best we can and integrate it and weight it appropriately so that it's reflected. That sounded like I'm making a recommendation. I'm not making any recommendation. I'm just making a point.
I was just thinking, as I reviewed the scoring criteria, it was good to just go through each item. We haven't done that for a while.
Yeah.
And each of those items made a lot of sense as you considered, oh, how would I look at this if I were an applicant?
Yeah.
And how would I look at this if I were evaluating a property? Sure. And I thought it was also very telling to see that we don't evaluate business plans or people. We evaluate properties. And I thought, the scoring mechanism was, maybe it's cumbersome and maybe we're not used to how the numbers add up. But I thought that was a very telling piece of it, is that what we're doing is we're looking at properties, not necessarily people or business plans, because we want the potential of those properties to be preserved.
The last memo point was just to weigh the pros and cons of GIS data. Ground truthing is so important, and we can see the characteristics or be told what the characteristics of our site are through GIS data, and then when we actually walk the property, it's something pretty different. And it doesn't capture the quality of the ecosystem in terms of its invasion. And while we can rely on the prime soils layers, like Jean said, the quality of the farming operation, its relation to the Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor, and the residents and how it impacts them in terms of where's that food going in our local food web. Those are things that aren't captured in GIS data. And so it's an important tool to have and a set of information, but it's by no means the end-all be-all of where we can go with the data the criteria that we're establishing.
Well, thank you both so much for putting these together. It feels like we've been talking about revisiting the scoring forever.
In this May
Is it
minutes,
is
we
it
were
shown
talking
in there?
about
We
it
were
and
talking
had-
about it back then. We punted it down the road by getting these C students to do their master's
Right.
project, but which wonderfully did not really encompass or address scoring. So, but clearly the time is now. But there's some external pressure here, and then there's also probably a real feeling of internal urgency. And I'd like your idea that it should fit within the strategic plan, but doesn't have to the strategic plan doesn't have to lead. We don't have to get that squared away. We can do a little bit of this simultaneously.
Yeah.
I think what Jean just brought up was really important in that you want to look for the things that are those big goals. Like, we're trying to preserve potential, long-term potential, not current status of the landscape. And so your criteria have to reflect that big goal of long-term protection. And so whatever criteria adjustment occurs has to be through that lens of big goals, even if the whole strategic plan is not laid out. And I also think, I think what Remy brought up in that point number 2 is it may be very little in criteria adjustment and more just in how you communicate it, and that it's not a single number, but it's some kind of multi-metric visual that immediately someone can say, oh, high on that, but a little bit lower on that, but really high on that. And that's essentially what that follow-up memo did for the Lepkowski property, because, I mean, Lum even said, reading the federal grant and scoring more carefully, that information was not provided. But if that was part of some summary index, then they could immediately see, okay, how, to what extent are we leveraging funds that have time-limited use or something like that.
Yeah.
So that can all go into some scoring system that's not just a single number.
For, you know, we have to keep projects moving, so we're not able to bring the best data representations to the table right now for council resolutions in the next, until we have that tool in front of us. But right now, moving forward for each resolution, considering a Greenbelt project, I'll be attaching the detailed scoring sheet. So again, it's really just numbers on a page, and someone has to really dive in and take the time to see how they're weighted to really balance that. It's not easily digestible in a single visual, but it's more information than council was provided before, which I think is really important and at least one step in the right direction. I think council wants to see more information on this now, so I'm going to be providing that.
Right. I also, to follow up what you were saying, I think it was really important to have an objective view of the parcels and not really talking about which operation, because I worry that that can get into a situation of declining people that might be more on the conventional side when they might tend to have the larger acreage as well.
Yeah.
So we need to be really careful in terms of not alienating the non-organic farms as well.
Yeah.
So, FYI. While still addressing council's concerns, of course.
Right.
Well, is it premature to ask, let's just assume that maybe you met this week, we may have a report out on this potential summer intern from C's.
Right. There, I did meet with the candidate this week, and we're going to be taking the next step and applying for funding for that candidate. So on the 18th, the application is due, and then I don't know how long it takes to process, but that would be, it's kind of our one shot is getting that funding so that they can work with us.
Not to jinx us, but if we did, is it reasonable to think that assuming that just if the two of you have some experience in this, you have even a gut sense of how long it might take appropriately, working a couple hours a month on this, how long would it take to put together recommendations that might come before GAC for a new strategic plan, or revisions to the strategic plan, and potential revisions to the scoring system?
It really depends how much it changes, right? How much disagreement that is on
The first meeting would probably be pretty telling once all the, I think the first step is establishing a scoring committee, and if we already have one, I mean, we have one in name. I don't know who's on it currently.
I said I'd be on it. You
Did I say
suggested, yes, it was probably
It
because
exists,
it's going back to what.
I volunteered on my first day, I remember that.
Yes,
That
but it was
my-
late in the meeting. It just proves what Julie said about bad things happening at the end of meetings. So there are at least
No,
two of us.
Yeah, I would be happy.
And is there anyone
I
else?
really wanted to.
And Alex, did Alex say he would as well?
volunteered.
Oh, yeah. I remember that, yeah.
Is Alex here?
No.
And did you also just start to raise your hand as a possible volunteer? Because then I could stay with the communications committee and not have to be on it. Well, anyway,
Well,
would
I
you
do
be
think,
willing
though,
to be
I'm-
lead person on this, or?
Sure, on
Thank
the scoring
you.
committee, I do just think it's important, though, to, yes, the strategic plan doesn't have to be finished before you do scoring, but just from an evaluations perspective and like how that works well, you've got to have your goals really clearly defined and agreed upon within the group before we would narrow down on some of the criteria
Right.
for scoring. So we would want to make sure that the whole committee is involved in that
Right.
goal setting, or maybe it's just goal revisiting
Right.
meeting.
Right, right. So certainly for agenda item for next meeting, would be for all of us to read the current strategic plan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to include it on the agenda, and we'll take 15, 20 minutes, well, we'll take whatever time we need to go through it and say, wow, that looks good and important, and here's what's missing that seems like it might have a place. And we could just maybe over the next couple of meetings, just have a conversation and then figure out in an organic way what that revision might look like and what the timeline might look like. Does that sound?
Like a plan.
Sounds like a plan?
Yeah.
And then the scoring stuff can also,
Great.
Flow from that.
yeah, all right.
Would you like to establish a scoring committee in terms of members today? Is that a thing that's voted on?
Yeah, I would love to. I don't know if we vote on them. And Alex isn't here, so he'd have no choice. We could all vote unanimously for Alex. And
I think that's a great idea.
right?
I don't think, she said, oh, I don't know if we need to vote on that.
No. Well, thank you for agreeing to coordinate this, and I think
Sure.
working together, we can certainly fill out the ranks but maybe just for next meeting, it would be for us to talk about the strategic plan and maybe to dig into the scoring, which I know you provided for us, but maybe not dig into the scoring today, but hold it for next meeting.
Is there a maximum number of people that can be on a committee without you violating the open committee meetings rule?
I think it is, isn't it 3?
That's what I was wondering. I
I
thought it
thought
was
that was
3.
true for communication, or at least I thought, when we established communications, it was the other.
It's typically less than that.
Oh, okay, so,
Oh.
It's
Or is it
typically
more-
what?
For a
It's
9-member?
typically less than whatever,
Can't be a
it's typically
quorum.
less than whatever a quorum is.
And your quorum is 5,
okay, so we could have as many as 4 on it.
I would think that,
so under 5.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm not an attorney on these things, but
I'll
But Remy
double
knows
check
one.
with the attorney.
Go check with
And if we
Derek.
can have 4, we can establish 4 members today.
Great,
Okay, sounds good.
all right. Thank you.
Or we can just hold it till next meeting because there's no rush and I can check with the attorney first.
Well, right
That
now,
sounds
we
good.
know, well, raise your hand if you're willing to serve right now. So we've got 2 here, 3, and Robert, okay. And then we'll circle back to Alex, and that'll be 4,
Okay.
and I won't be on it.
Good, I'm glad to keep you on the communications committee, John.
That's where my heart is.
And they'll be related.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all. All right, perfect. I've managed to misplace my agenda. Are we through the? Oh, we have Bonnie, thank you.
The other sub-points to the scoring discussion were really, it sounds like where
We've covered that.
we've covered that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So C4.
Barry Lonick. Do you have the letter? Was it was just an email.
It was an email.
Do you want to sum it up?
Uh,
He emailed Jennifer,
So-
emailed Chairperson Fike and said, now might be a great time to expand the boundary of the Greenbelt because there are properties outside the Greenbelt that look like they'd really be attractive and allow us to achieve this 1/3 acquisition to appraisal ratio. I don't know that Jennifer emailed back, but this came up in the executive committee meeting. Our feeling on the executive committee is that now is not a good time, for obvious reasons, to revisit the boundaries of the Greenbelt. But that the boundaries of the Greenbelt might certainly become part of our conversation vis-a-vis the strategic plan and the scoring process. But that now is just not a good time to make that suggestion to city council. I don't know if
I
people have
agree.
reactions or.
I agree.
Do we miss a critical window by not suggesting it now?
No, we can bring it up at any time.
Okay.
And it's been expanded once before. I don't know
Twice?
twice before, and I don't know the details, didn't even know it was twice. So, do you have details on when it was?
I think 2013 was the most current.
Okay. And it was very minor. It was a really small.
Yeah.
So there's no particular funding or parcel urgency that he's suggesting
Oh, I
it
think
for
he
right
has
now?
parcels that are close to our boundary that he feels are
Right,
eligible.
but I don't know if they have any significance beyond all the other parcels close to our boundary.
And how would that work? Would the townships themselves have to sign on before, it
Right.
seems to me we can't just arbitrarily increase.
Yeah, it's
So
a,
that's complicated as well.
yeah. You have to actually amend the ordinance, which is, it's not as simple as a decision that we vote on. It's a pretty involved process.
Yeah.
So
That you
assuming,
won't-
I don't think there's anything that we need to vote on, but it sounds like we have enough for Remy to get back to Jennifer that the consensus here was that we are not going to entertain taking forward a possible expansion as a recommendation to City Council at this time. That sound right? Okay.
That's good.
Okay, assuming that we've covered all new business, Remy, thank you so much. Next agenda items, does anyone have agenda items that they'd like to add in addition to our common pledge that we're going to read the strategic plan and discuss both it and the scoring at our next meeting? Anything else? Okay. Public commentary, seeing that there's no public speakers at this time. Always wondered about this item on the agenda. Communications, I assume that means, does any members of the commission have any communications they want to share with us? Okay. Report from commission committees. So the executive committee met. We talked about the Lepkowski vote. Remy shared a couple of upcoming properties that are in the pipeline. We did talk about when a property comes before the commission and is voted on and then comes before council, having someone from the commission speak at the beginning of the council meeting to explain the commission's recommendation. And then we talked about the potential intern, and I think that's it from what I recall. Communications committee, we haven't met, have we? Nothing from them. And we did talk about the bus tour and possibly moving it to the fall, just for a variety of reasons, and one being that we've gotten good turnout in recent years, but it might be a really nice time to capitalize on the fall harvest,
Yeah.
and the fall colors, and do it when we don't have a football game, but also to really work to get as many of our city council members on the bus as possible. Okay, any last comments before I bang the gavel on this stack of napkins? Do we have to vote to go into adjourn?
Someone
To
just has to
adjourn?
move.
We'd have to, yeah. Does someone want to move that we adjourn?
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.